These black kids don't belong here. The voice, loud and sharp, sliced through the quiet hum of the cabin. Three 13-year-old girls sat frozen in their first-class seats, their identical faces streaked with tears as a white flight attendant stood over them, accusation burning in her eyes. This is the story of Jane, Joanna, and Joy Bennett, triplets on the cusp of the greatest moment of their lives, now caught in the crosshairs of the cruelest kind of discrimination. And the woman tormenting them? She had no idea who their parents were. What happened next would cost her everything. The chaos brewing in first class was impossible to ignore. Rebecca Matthews, a flight attendant with 20 years of service etched into her face, loomed over the three girls, her eyes radiating pure contempt. "These seats were not purchased for you," she declared, her voice carrying through the cabin. "Children like you have no business being in first class." Children like you. Those four words hung in the air like a poison. Jane, Joanna, and Joy, three identical faces, three sets of terrified eyes, fumbled to show her their boarding passes, their competition letters, every piece of validation their grandmother had so carefully packed. But Rebecca wasn't interested in evidence. She was interested in humiliation, and she was ruthlessly effective. In front of the entire cabin, she accused them of fraud. When the drink cart came around, she denied them water. When another flight attendant tried to slip them bottles, she confiscated them. She announced over the intercom that there were suspicious minors in first class. She radioed for airport police to have them removed for trespassing. She leaned over to surrounding passengers and whispered that the girls were likely runaways, traveling on stolen tickets. Three 13-year-old girls, shaking, crying, begging to be believed. Throughout the cabin, phones began to emerge, their small lenses recording everything. Some passengers whispered in discomfort. Others stared determinedly out the window, unwilling to get involved. A few tried to speak up, but Rebecca silenced them with the unyielding authority of her uniform and her 2 decades of service. The triplets were adrift, lost in a nightmare they couldn't comprehend. Their grandmother had saved for 2 years to buy them these tickets, to make them feel special before the biggest day of their young lives, and now they were being treated like criminals. But here is what Rebecca Matthews didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known. As she stood there, methodically dismantling the dignity of 3 innocent children, someone was watching. At the very back of first class, a passenger had seen every cruel word, every denied drink, every humiliating announcement. Someone who had the power to end Rebecca's career with a single phone call. And that someone was about to stand up. What follows is a story that reminds us that sometimes justice does find those who abuse their power. But to understand the reckoning that was coming for Rebecca Matthews, we must go back to that morning, hours before the nightmare began, when 3 little girls were simply thrilled about their trip. Because Jane, Joanna, and Joy Bennett weren't just any 3 girls on a flight. They were children carrying the weight of their family's dreams, their grandmother's sacrifices, and their own brilliant, hopeful minds. The Bennett triplets had woken at 5 a.m. in the small 2-bedroom apartment they shared with their grandmother, Patricia. The walls were thin, and the furniture was second-hand, but the home was overflowing with love. And on this particular morning, it buzzed with an excitement so powerful you could feel it in the air. Jane, Joanna, and Joy were on their way to Washington, D.C., not for a vacation, but as finalists in the National Youth Science Competition. They were set to compete against the brightest young minds in the country. Their project, a revolutionary water purification system designed to provide clean drinking water to communities in crisis. At 13 years old, they had created something that could save lives. And the woman who made it all possible was Patricia Bennett. At 67, her hands were so worn and calloused, they told the story of a lifetime of hard work. For 40 years, she had been a domestic worker, cleaning other people's homes, scrubbing their floors, washing their laundry. 5 years ago, a car accident had stolen her daughter and son-in-law, the triplets' parents. In one terrible moment, Patricia went from being a doting grandmother to the only parent 3 8-year-old girls had left. She was already barely making ends meet. Now, she had 3 more mouths to feed, 3 futures to secure. Most people would have buckled under the weight. But Patricia Bennett wasn't most people. She took a second job, then a third. Housekeeper by day, office cleaner by night, laundry worker on weekends. She survived on 4 hours of sleep, her body aching, but she never once complained. Patricia had a dream. She wanted her granddaughters to have the opportunities she never did. She wanted them to know they were just as valuable, just as deserving as any other child in America. When the girls qualified for the competition, Patricia wept for 2 hours straight. Her babies were finalists. The grand prize was more than a trophy. It was a full scholarship to a prestigious prep school. This, Patricia knew, was the door they needed. The opportunity that could break the cycle of poverty that had held their family for generations. So she did something she had never done. She splurged. For 2 years, Patricia had been tucking away $5 here, $10 there, in an old coffee can hidden in her closet. It was for their future. But when she saw the plane tickets to Washington, she made a decision. She bought 3 first-class tickets. It took nearly everything she had saved, but she didn't care. She wanted her girls to feel special. She wanted them, just once, to feel like they belonged in the spaces the world so often told people like them they did not. That morning at the airport, Patricia's hands trembled as she checked them in. She had never flown anywhere, let alone in first class, but she'd heard it was nice. She wanted that for her girls. At the gate, she pulled each of them into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. "Make your parents proud," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Remember who you are. You belong anywhere you want to be." Jane, the confident leader, promised they would call the moment they landed. Joanna, the sensitive artist, tucked a drawing of a heart into her grandmother's purse. Joy, the brilliant but shy scientist, simply held on tight and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Patricia watched them go, her heart a tangled mess of pride and worry. She prayed they would be safe, that the world would be kind, that people would see them the way she did. The triplets boarded the plane, clutching matching backpacks embroidered with their initials. They found their seats, 3A, 3B, and 3C, and their eyes widened in awe. The chairs were huge, the legroom was endless. For a moment they felt exactly as their grandmother had hoped, special, valued, like they belonged. Jane gazed out the window, already charting the flight path. Joanna sketched in her notebook, calming her nerves through art. Joy silently reviewed her presentation notes. They pulled out photos of their parents, their mother's bright smile, their father's kind eyes. "Mom and Dad would be so proud," Jane whispered. Other passengers settled in around them. Everything felt normal, exciting, full of promise. And then Rebecca Matthews noticed them. She was a woman who prided herself on running a tight cabin. When she saw 3 identical black girls, young and unaccompanied, sitting in her first-class section, her expression soured. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned toward her junior colleague, Marcus Chen. "Why are there unsupervised children in first class?" she muttered. Marcus glanced at the girls, then back at Rebecca, confused. "There are several unaccompanied minors in this cabin," he said quietly. "It's pretty normal." But Rebecca wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on the triplets, filled with a suspicion that had nothing to do with airline policy and everything to do with prejudice. "Those girls," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Something's not right." Marcus felt a knot of unease, but he didn't push back. Rebecca was his senior by 15 years. He stayed quiet. The triplets, oblivious, were still whispering about their project, passing a stress ball between them, giggling with nervous excitement. They were innocent. They were children. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. But Rebecca Matthews had already made up her mind, and in 10 minutes she would walk toward seats 3A, 3B, and 3C, and their world would begin to fall apart. The moment Rebecca started toward them, Jane's stomach dropped. There was something in the woman's deliberate, cold approach that silenced them instantly. She stopped directly in front of their row and crossed her arms. "Boarding passes," she demanded. Her tone wasn't a request, it was an accusation. Hands trembling, the girls produced their passes. Rebecca snatched them, scrutinizing them as if they were forgeries. "Where are your parents?" she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Our grandmother bought the tickets for us," Jane explained politely, just as she'd been taught. "We're finalists in a national science competition in D.C. Rebecca's head snapped up. For a fleeting second, the girls thought she might be impressed. Instead, her expression hardened. "Your grandmother?" she repeated slowly, drawing the word out as if it were an absurdity. "Your grandmother. bought 3 first-class tickets. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. The unspoken words filled the space between them. How could someone like her afford this? Joanna's eyes filled with tears. Joy shrank into her seat, disappearing into herself. Only Jane held the flight attendant's gaze. "Yes, ma'am," she said, her voice steady. "Our grandmother saved for 2 years. She worked 3 jobs." Rebecca was unmoved. "I'm going to need to see identification," she announced, "and proof of this competition you claim to be attending." Claim? The word was a slap. Jane's hands shook as she dug through her backpack and pulled out the official letter from the National Youth Science Competition, embossed seal and all. Rebecca barely glanced at it. She held it for 5 seconds before handing it back with a dismissive shake of her head. "This could be printed by anyone," she said flatly. "It looks unofficial." Unofficial. The word landed with the force of a physical blow. Joy's breath hitched. Joanna's tears spilled over. Jane felt a hot surge of rage and helplessness. What could they do? How could they prove they belonged? Across the aisle, a businessman who had been watching the entire exchange looked down at his laptop and said nothing. Rebecca turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the triplets in a stunned, wounded silence. "Did we do something wrong?" Joanna whispered, her voice breaking. "No," Jane said firmly, though her own hands were still shaking. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Maybe we should just move to the back," Joy suggested, her eyes darting nervously at the other passengers. "Grandma Patricia paid for these seats," Jane said, her voice growing stronger, channeling her grandmother's resilience. "We have every right to be here. We are not moving." In the galley, Rebecca cornered Marcus, her face tight with self-righteous certainty. "Those girls are trouble," she muttered, glancing back toward the triplets. "I can always tell." "I'm telling you, something's not right," Rebecca hissed, her voice a low conspiratorial murmur meant only for Marcus. "Those tickets are stolen. I can feel it. They're probably runaways. The whole story reeks of fabrication." Marcus's brow furrowed, a deep unease settling in his stomach. "Rebecca, they have boarding passes. They have IDs. Maybe we could just quietly verify with the gate agent and let it be?" "I know trouble when I see it," she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I've been doing this for 20 years. Those girls do not belong in first class, and I intend to prove it." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it and closed it. He was 26, barely 2 years into the job. Rebecca was a senior flight attendant, a veteran with enough seniority to make his life a living hell. It wasn't his business, he told himself. He told himself she probably knew what she was doing. He told himself a series of quiet, convenient lies that allowed him to retreat into silence. As more passengers boarded, Rebecca's entire demeanor transformed. The mask of hostility dissolved as a white family with 2 small children approached. Her face lit up like the morning sun. "Oh my goodness, aren't you two just adorable?" she cooed, bending down to their level. "Would you like some extra snacks? Coloring books, perhaps? Let me get those for you right away." The parents beamed, thanking her for her exceptional kindness. Rebecca personally helped stow their luggage and chatted warmly about their destination. Then she walked right past Jane, Joanna, and Joy. Not a word, not a glance, not even the most basic acknowledgement of their existence. Her posture radiated contempt, shoulders back, chin high, movements stiff and deliberate. She passed them once, twice, 3 times, and with each pass, the message was as clear as the cabin lights. "You are not welcome here." An elderly white couple settled into the seats behind them, and Rebecca appeared with pillows and blankets they hadn't even requested. "You just let me know if you need anything at all," she said, her voice dripping with warmth. A teenage boy traveling alone in 5C received a special smile. "Traveling solo? How very grown-up of you. Let me know if you need anything, honey." But for Jane, Joanna, and Joy, there was nothing. No smile, no word, not a shred of human courtesy. Joy leaned toward her sisters, her earlier whisper now edged with desperation. "Maybe we should just move to the back. This doesn't feel safe." Jane squeezed her sister's hand, her own heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Grandma Patricia paid for these seats. She wanted us to feel special. We are not letting this woman take that away from us. We belong here." But even as the words left her lips, she wondered if she believed them. Because in that moment, with the flight attendant's glare like a physical weight and the curious stares of other passengers, belonging felt like the most distant thing in the world. Then, Rebecca returned. She planted herself in the aisle, directly in front of their row, and raised her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "I need to sort out a situation with these tickets before we can take off," she announced, her tone leaving no doubt as to who the situation was. "There appears to be an irregularity that requires immediate attention." Every head in first class turned. The businessman across the aisle glanced up from his laptop. The elderly couple craned their necks. The family with the small children stared openly. Dozens of eyes, all fixated on three 13-year-old girls who had done nothing wrong except exist in a space where one woman had decided they shouldn't be. Joanna was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Joy stared into her lap, her small body trembling. Jane sat rigid, her fists clenched so tightly her nails bit into her palms, fighting a desperate battle against her own tears. If she started, she knew she would never be able to stop. They felt judged, exposed, humiliated. And the worst part, the absolute cruelest part, was the insidious whisper of doubt that began to creep in. That maybe they had done something wrong. Maybe they were the problem. That maybe girls who looked like them really didn't belong in first class no matter what their grandmother had sacrificed to put them there. That is the insidious poison of racism. It makes you question your own innocence. It makes you feel guilty for simply existing. It makes you feel small. And Rebecca Matthews was just getting started. What Rebecca did next wasn't just unprofessional or cruel. It was a calculated public shaming of three children who had no power to defend themselves, and she did it to ensure everyone knew exactly what she thought of them. She pulled out her radio. She held it close to her mouth, but her voice was deliberately loud, carrying through the quiet cabin. "Gate agent, this is Rebecca Matthews on flight 447. I need immediate verification on suspicious minors in first class. Repeat, suspicious minors in seats 3A, 3B, and 3C. Suspicious minors." She said it like she was reporting a crime in progress. The gate agent's voice crackled back, professional and perplexed. "Can you provide the seat numbers again and describe the situation?" Rebecca looked directly at the three girls, her gaze a physical blow. "Seats 3A, 3B, and 3C, she repeated slowly, her eyes never leaving their faces. "Three unaccompanied minors. Their tickets don't match their profile, and I have concerns about how these seats were obtained." Their profile? The only profile Rebecca had was the one she had constructed from her own prejudice. Joanna broke. Her silent tears became quiet, hitching sobs she tried to stifle. Jane wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, a futile attempt to shield her from the sea of staring faces. Joy simply stared at the seat in front of her, frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. Then Rebecca picked up the PA microphone, and her voice filled the cabin with chilling clarity. "Attention, passengers. Until we can resolve the ticketing situation, the passengers in seats 3A, 3B, and 3C will not be receiving beverage or food service. They are not confirmed passengers at this time. We apologize for the inconvenience." Not confirmed passengers. She had just announced to a plane full of strangers that three children were frauds. Marcus began the pre-departure beverage service, his cart rattling down the aisle. He offered water, juice, and coffee to every single passenger, working his way forward. The elderly couple got their drinks. The businessman took his coffee. The family got juice boxes for their kids. And then Marcus reached row 3. He looked at the three identical faces, two of them streaked with tears, all of them pleading silently for a shred of kindness. From the galley, Rebecca watched him, her arms crossed, her expression a dare. Marcus walked right past them. He didn't stop. He didn't make eye contact. He moved to the row behind them and continued his service as if Jane, Joanna, and Joy were invisible. Joy's voice was small and cracked. "Excuse me," she said quietly as Marcus passed again. "Could we please have some water?" Marcus froze. For a heartbeat it seemed he might defy the order. But Rebecca's voice sliced through the cabin from the galley. "Service is for confirmed ticketed passengers only. Once your situation is verified, you will receive service." Joy's face crumpled. She had been denied a glass of water in front of everyone, treated as if it were a privilege she had not earned. The businessman in 3D, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, finally spoke up, his voice firm, Excuse me, these girls clearly have boarding passes. Why are they being treated this way? Rebecca's face hardened. Sir, this is a security matter. I must ask you to let the crew handle this. But they haven't done anything wrong, he pressed. Sir, Rebecca interrupted, her voice dangerously sharp. If you continue to interfere, I will be forced to report you as a disruptive passenger. Is that understood? The man's face flushed. He opened his mouth, then closed it, casting an apologetic look at the girls before turning back to his laptop. He had tried, but not hard enough. And the girls learned another painful lesson. Speaking up means nothing when the person in power refuses to listen. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brief delay due to a security concern. We appreciate your patience. A security concern. 3 girls with valid tickets were now a security concern. A wave of groans and impatient sighs swept through the cabin, and the looks directed at the triplets curdled from curiosity to outright hostility. This delay was their fault. Rebecca returned, holding a tablet like a shield of authority. I've reviewed your seat assignments, she announced, her voice cold and clinical. First class is overbooked. You'll need to be moved to economy. Jane found her voice, thin but laced with steel. First class isn't overbooked, she said quietly, pointing to 3 empty seats 2 rows back. Those seats are empty. Rebecca didn't even glance. Those seats are reserved, she dismissed. Gather your belongings and move to the back of the aircraft, now. But our grandmother paid for these seats, Jane pleaded, her voice breaking. She saved for 2 years. These are our seats. Your grandmother made an error, Rebecca said flatly. The tickets were processed incorrectly. You don't belong in first class. There it was, the ugly truth she had been dancing around for the last 30 minutes. You don't belong. Joanna was sobbing uncontrollably now. Joy had retreated deep inside herself, dissociated from the nightmare unfolding around her. And Rebecca Matthews stood there, a mask of smug satisfaction on her face, the victor in a battle against 3 children who had never even been fighting. But what Rebecca couldn't know was that someone had been watching every cruel, calculated moment. Someone who held the power to end her career with a single phone call, and that someone had finally seen enough. Rebecca picked up her radio, her voice cold and final. Ground security, I need officers on board flight 447. Unaccompanied minors with questionable tickets are causing a disturbance. We're not causing a disturbance, Jane whispered, her voice cracking. Rebecca leaned in close, her voice a venomous threat. Lower your voice or I will document that you became aggressive. Is that what you want? Jane fell silent, trembling. Within minutes, 2 security officers boarded the plane. As they approached, Jane, Joanna, and Joy clutched each other in terror. One officer was a white man with a neutral expression. The other was a black man in his 30s, Officer James Wilson. The moment his eyes landed on 3 terrified, weeping black girls, his jaw tightened. He knew this scene. He knew exactly what he was looking at. These girls have tickets that don't match their profile, Rebecca began, launching into her litany of lies. They claim their grandmother bought them, but I suspect fraud. Their story about a science competition sounds fabricated. That word again, profile. Officer Wilson's voice was calm, cutting through her tirade. May I see their documentation, please? With shaking hands, Jane produced everything. Boarding passes, IDs, the acceptance letter from the competition, the email confirmation for the flight. Officer Wilson took the documents and reviewed them, not with a cursory glance, but with careful, deliberate attention. He read every line. He verified every detail. Finally, he looked up, his gaze shifting from the papers to Rebecca. His expression was hard as granite. Everything here is completely legitimate. Their boarding passes are valid, their identification matches, and this documentation is official. There is no issue here. Rebecca's face went pale, but she wasn't backing down. Officer, the flight attendant began, her voice a low, confidential murmur. With all due respect, something isn't right here. Children from certain backgrounds, they don't typically have access to first-class tickets. I've been doing this for 20 years. I can tell when a situation just doesn't add up. The phrase, certain backgrounds, hung in the stale cabin air. A few passengers gasped audibly. Certain backgrounds, repeated a businessman, his eyes wide with disbelief. Officer Wilson's posture stiffened, his voice becoming crisp and official. Ma'am, what you just described is racial profiling, which is a violation of federal law. These young ladies have valid tickets and legitimate documentation. They have done absolutely nothing wrong. The only issue I see here is a flight attendant harassing passengers based on their race. A hot flush crept up the flight attendant's neck. My name is Rebecca, and I never mentioned race, she snapped. I am following safety protocols. Protocols based on what? Officer Wilson interjected sharply. The fact that they're black? There are other unaccompanied minors on this flight, but somehow, only these three are a problem for you. The businessman stood, his voice ringing with authority. Officer, I'm an attorney. I am prepared to testify that what I witnessed was blatant discrimination. This flight attendant has harassed these children, denied them service, and even confiscated their water without any legitimate cause. A young Latina mother clutching a baby spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. When I boarded, she was so kind to me. She welcomed me, offered extra supplies for my baby. But these girls, she has treated them like criminals from the moment they stepped on board. The difference? I think we all know what the difference is. A chorus of agreement followed. This is disgraceful. Those poor girls haven't done a thing. You should know, I've been recording this entire exchange. Rebecca's face went pale, but she doubled down. They're 13 years old. They're too young to travel alone in first class. It's a liability. From the galley, another flight attendant named Marcus Chen stepped forward. That's not true, he stated calmly. Airline policy allows unaccompanied minors aged 5 to 17 in any cabin class, provided they have the proper documentation. These girls meet all requirements. Rebecca spun on him, her eyes blazing. You have been undermining my authority. You provided them with unauthorized service. I gave 3 children water, Marcus shot back, because showing basic human decency isn't a crime. The cabin erupted in support. An elderly couple began to applaud. Officer Wilson stepped between the 2 flight attendants. Ma'am, these young ladies are legitimate passengers. They will remain in their assigned seats and they will receive full service. If you continue to harass them, I will file formal complaints with both the airline and the FAA. Is that clear? But before Rebecca could respond, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. At the back of first class, in seat 7F, a woman stood. She was an older black woman, her silver hair impeccably styled, her navy suit radiating a quiet, unshakable authority. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a controlled fury. She walked down the aisle with slow, deliberate steps, and with each footfall, the cabin fell deeper into silence. Rebecca saw her approaching and opened her mouth to speak, but something in the woman's powerful presence stopped her cold. The woman stopped directly in front of Rebecca. My name, she said, her voice low yet carrying to every corner of the cabin, is Dr. Diane Porter. I am the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for this airline. The color drained from Rebecca's face. Her hands began to shake. Dr. Porter held up her phone. I am on this flight because we've received numerous complaints about discriminatory behavior on this specific route. I have documented everything you've said and done to these children, every accusation, every denial of service, every humiliating announcement. I have video, I have audio, and I have an entire cabin full of witnesses. The silence was absolute. Dr. Porter's voice grew quieter, more devastating. You called 3 13-year-old girls criminals. You denied them water. You threatened them with the police, and you did this based on nothing more than the color of their skin and your own prejudice. Rebecca stammered, I was following protocols. Children from certain backgrounds, Dr. Porter interrupted, quoting her own words back to her. That is what you said. Would you care to explain, precisely, which backgrounds you were referring to? Because this entire cabin heard you, and soon, so will our board of directors, our legal team, and federal investigators. Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes. Please, I have 20 years with this company. I have a family. Your job is to serve all passengers with dignity, Dr. Porter said, her voice like ice, not to terrorize children based on your personal biases. She then turned to Jane, Joanna, and Joy, and her expression softened completely. I am so deeply sorry for what you experienced. You did nothing wrong. You deserve to be here. You belong in these seats. The triplets stared at the woman who had appeared like a guardian angel, tears of relief finally streaming down their faces. This is the moment justice arrives. And if that sight gives you chills, make sure you're subscribed because what Dr. Porter does next is exactly what should happen when people abuse their power. Her voice, though still quiet, was now absolute. I boarded this flight specifically because of multiple complaints about a particular flight attendant targeting passengers of color. I needed to see it for myself. Rebecca's face went from white to gray, her body seeming to deflate. I have recorded everything, Dr. Porter continued. Every policy you violated, every discriminatory act. It is all documented. Rebecca stammered desperately. I was protecting the airline. Something felt off. What felt off? Dr. Porter's tone was sharp. 3 well-mannered children with legitimate tickets, valid identification, and official documentation for a prestigious competition? What exactly felt off to you, Rebecca? Because from where I stand, the only thing that felt off to you was the color of their skin. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came out. Any answer would only confirm the ugly truth. Dr. Porter turned from her and knelt to meet the triplets' eyes, her face transformed by warmth and compassion. I am so sorry, she said gently. You are valued, you are welcome, and you belong here. Joy, still shaking, managed to whisper about their water purification project for the science competition. Dr. Porter's eyes lit up with genuine interest as the girl quietly explained how their system could provide clean water to communities in crisis. You 3, Dr. Porter said, her voice thick with emotion, represent the very best of the next generation. Your grandmother has raised brilliant, kind, and resilient young women. Never, ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Then she stood, turning back to Rebecca. Her voice was once again made of ice. Rebecca Matthews, you are terminated. Effective immediately. Not suspended. Terminated. This is unfair, Rebecca cried, shock turning to fury. You're making an example of me. I was doing my job. Let me list your violations, Dr. Porter stated, her expression unmoved. Racial profiling, denial of service, public humiliation of minors, and creating a hostile environment. But perhaps worst of all, you targeted 3 children who have already lost their parents. You took a special moment their grandmother sacrificed for, and you turned it into a trauma they will carry for years. She held up a hand to cut off any protest. Officer Wilson, please escort Ms. Matthews off this aircraft. She is no longer an employee of this airline. As a protesting Rebecca was led away, every passenger watched in silence. Dr. Porter then turned to Marcus Chen. Thank you for doing the right thing. That took courage. The captain emerged from the cockpit and apologized personally to the girls. You are valued passengers, and I am deeply sorry for what you experienced. If you believe actions must have consequences, hit that subscribe button now. Because what happens next shows that sometimes the world does see injustice, and it does something about it. Have you ever seen someone face real consequences for discrimination? Share your story in the comments, because what Dr. Porter did next is going to restore your faith in humanity. She wasn't finished. She immediately upgraded the girls' return tickets and provided vouchers for their grandmother Patricia to fly with them next time. She arranged for a car service to take them safely to their hotel. Then, she shared something personal. When I was your age, she told them, teachers who looked and sounded just like Rebecca told me I wasn't college material. I became an airline executive, in part to ensure no child would ever be made to feel that they don't belong. The businessman from 3D approached with his card. I'm a venture capitalist, he said. I fund youth STEM initiatives. Contact me after your competition. Minds like yours deserve support. Other passengers lined up to offer encouragement, many sharing their own stories. An elderly woman with tears on her face whispered, I'm so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Fear kept me silent. During the flight, Dr. Porter sat with the triplets as they video called their grandmother, who wept as she heard the story. Grandma, we're okay, Jane assured her. You taught us to stand up for ourselves with dignity, and we did. Dr. Porter took the phone. Mrs. Bennett, your granddaughters were remarkable. The airline will make this right, and they will never pay for another flight with us. At the competition, the girls channeled their experience into their presentation, speaking with a passion that electrified the room. They won first place, dedicating the award to their grandmother and speaking out against the discrimination they faced. The video of their speech went viral. The airline, guided by Dr. Porter, implemented new policies, body cameras, quarterly bias training, and zero tolerance for discrimination. 3 months later, the triplets were thriving at a new prep school, funded in part by the Businessman's Foundation. Marcus Chen was promoted and helped design the new inclusion training. The final scene is of the three girls and their grandmother, months later, sitting together in first class, holding hands. Patricia looks at her granddaughters, now treated with the respect they always deserved, and silently thanks God for their unbreakable spirit. A message appears. Discrimination thrives in silence. Speak up. Stand up. Every child deserves to dream without limits. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it. These stories need to be told. These voices need to be heard. And children like Jane, Joanna, and Joy deserve a world that sees their brilliance before it ever sees their skin. We'll see you in our next video.